Nigeria's journey into nationhood, its political struggles and the events that have shaped its current realities are not dissimilar to a pilgrim's journey through a labyrinth of uncertainty when an even more daunting valley of expectation awaits. Hundreds of tribes and tongues settled in this geographical space, existing in their enclaves as distinct groups for centuries. The politics of trade and conquest, expressed in colonialism, however, began to give the nation its identity, having been marked and formally annexed by Britain in 1865. Two distinct protectorates became one in 1914 for the administrative convenience of the nation's steel-handed overlords. The might of the colonialists and their imperial will notwithstanding, it became obvious that this large entity would be difficult to completely dominate. Lords followed lords, and constitutions melted for new ones, but none could even marginally capture the growing clamor for self-rule, a much darker skin at the helm of Africa's most populous nation. The drivers of this consciousness had the spotlight on them. The rhetorics were fueled by passion, commitment, courage, and the unique foresight that a giant would soon rise.
We in Nigeria appreciate the advantages which the size of our country and of its population give us, but we have absolutely no aggressive intentions.
Nigeria will attain independence on October 1, 1960. So it makes no difference to me whether it's Sardauna or Balewa or Chief Awolowo or myself will become the first Prime Minister. So long as Nigeria is free, I'll be satisfied.
Independence for Nigeria in 1960 is imperative. But independence for Nigeria as a corporate entity is not enough. The peoples of Nigeria must at the same time be guaranteed their freedom.
The nation formally gained independence in 1960 to good wishes and intentions. Its first steps in self-rule saw some faltering movements as those at the wheel sought answers. These chapters were not in the original plot. Power tussle and stoic viewpoints made compromise difficult to achieve.
We started as provinces, and the provinces themselves were a kind of amalgamation of different groups in each province. But when the British came, after they conquered us, they now set up initially 12 provinces. From there, and changed us into 3 regions: North, West, and East. And they amalgamated, they put the 3 together into a Federal Republic of Nigeria. The 3 at that time each had a governor and premier. At the center we had the prime minister and also ceremonial president.
We are highly intolerant of opposition of any kind, whether it's in the political party or if it's in the church, even if it's in a company. We don't want to hear from the other side. And that was what led in 1962 to the federal government led by Balewa declaring a state of emergency in Western Nigeria. And it was an intra-party issue which allowed the federal government to intervene and declare a state of emergency in the southwest. And that crisis lingered on until the elections of 1965, Western Regional Election of 65, which were the most massively rigged election in our history.
While the push and shove were going on, the military maintained stoic silence in spite of happenings in other nations. This will not remain so, for much longer.
All people on board the ship, Nigerians, Ghanaians, British, or whoever was in the boat, when they knew that I was a senior officer, they were asking me a question: do you think that a coup can take place in Nigeria? A coup in Nigeria? Of course, I determinedly fought against that sort of question. I said, impossible. No, we are an apolitical army, and we are not trained to interfere with the government, but to be loyal to the government and loyal to the country, loyal to the head of the government, and such a thing cannot happen in Nigeria as far as one was concerned. And so that was how things went until 12 days on board the ship when we arrived in Accra. And during that time, there were 3 coups in Central and West Africa, and one of them was very close to Nigeria. And so some of the people who were still on board the ship and probably had asked me that question before, they asked me, how now? So I had to say to them, well, let me say this: it is impossible that this sort of thing could happen. But let me be. But all I said was, it is getting too close home for comfort.
Nigeria's first coup d'etat on the 15th of January 1966 brought the First Republic to its end. Its brutal outcome prompted a counter-coup carried out by General Johnson Agui Ironsi.
And of course, when the military came, again, another blunder was committed when Ironsi issued a decree, I think decree number 2, bringing federal government to an end in Nigeria and declaring that Nigeria had become a unitary government and that the states had become provinces. Fundamental error. Again, not recognizing that Nigeria is highly heterogeneous. At the last count, there were about 443 or 448 distinct ethnic and linguistic groups in Nigeria. Now, to treat those groups as if they were homogeneous and identical is a big error. That was why Ironsi was overthrown.
The federal military government under Ironsi lasted for some months. Then there was a third toppling of government in the same year, which produced General Yakubu Gowon as head of state.
I had to become the head of state, and I can assure you the fear that came over me is that it is me. It is never in my thought whatsoever. My ambition was one day to even probably head head the army, but not for me to become the head of state. But with the problem where, if I were having problem, officers being disobeyed by other ranks, other than either those that they know. I think the only thing that one can do was, if I meant to see whatever, one had to accept that with the agreement of other members of the Supreme Military Council that were there, of course, probably except I think Ojukwu, who was in Kano, and later on, of course, it moved to Enugu.
The crisis brewing took a leap into the flames as Nigeria was plunged into a civil war, which lasted for 2 years, 6 months and 1 week. The ties of brotherhood were badly strained, but a new handshake was extended and taken.
As soon as the report was made that there is the capitulation of the rebel forces on the 12th, the 12th of January. Immediately, of course, my reaction made a speech, to say, we thank God, the war is over and the suffering of the ordinary people, is over. And one made the speech of no victor, no vanquish.
General Murtala Muhammad became the nation's head of state on the 28th of July, 1975, with a promise to return the nation to a civilian rule by October 1, 1979.
We should explore how to create a new parliamentary system which will not arouse ecstatic tribal frenzies which were characteristic of the previous political atmosphere.
He did not live to see the day, being a victim of an abortive coup. General Obasanjo became head of state and saw through the promise given by his boss.
And we meticulously planned and followed step by step, drafting or setting a committee to draft a new constitution, establishing a constituent assembly, conducting an election based on the new constitution, and handing over to the newly elected government.
The Second Republic, Nigeria's second romance with democracy. This experience failed when vows were to be renewed in 1983.
They failed because of the rigging of the election in 1983. When Funagoro was talking about a landslide all over the place. And some military people said, no, this is not landslide, it is gunslide. It was the massive rigging of 1983 that led to the demise of the government, because MPN didn't want any other group to rule. Remember that MPN government of 1793 was a minority government. MPN had 37%, Shagari had 37% of the vote. I was president. He had about 40% of the members in the House. So it was a minority government that now wanted to become majority by force through rigging. And so the ship capsized.
Another military intervention brought in the men in khaki for another stint. In the early 90s, General Ibrahim Babangida promised to return to civil rule. The parties formed were collapsed into two, with elections held into governorship and legislative positions. But the dream faltered at the presidential polls with the annulment of the June 12, 1993 presidential election.
Most of us, when we were there, came up with a civilian program after the military intervention. General Jack Gawan had a program, and I had a program. Murtala Muhammad, Obasanjo, they had a program. So we realized that military intervention is no longer going to be acceptable. The people wanted to elect their own representative, people who will lead them, not by the barrel of the gun. And so whenever the military staged a coup, the first thing that came to their mind is to come up with a program of civilian return to civil rule.
And there were attempts at democratizing the country. And each attempt had its own hiccups here and there, and fell by the wayside. It started with General Ibrahim Babangida, who was then military president, and he did what they called zero-party elections. Again, he went into a two-party system and tried to put in a national assembly that was under the military government, and was looking forward to having full democracy when election for the presidency takes place. And that was attempted when Chief MKO Abiola won, supposedly at that time, won the election under the SDP. These were the two political parties which were introduced by General Babangida. Of course, that was not to be due to certain internal exigencies that were mainly associated with the military themselves.
The controversy that trailed the annulment led to the Babangida administration stepping aside for an interim government under Chief Ernest Shonikan, which barely had time to settle down before it was muscled aside by General Sani Abacha. After General Abacha's demise on the 8th of June 1998, it made way for the emergence of General Abdulsalami Abubakar, whose administration was the midwife of the Fourth Republic.
I inherited a country which was in turmoil. The Presby, we were almost boycotted by all the international community. We had so many sanctions. So when I came into power, our objectivity first was to normalize our relationship with the international community and try to see how we can organize a transition program where we can have a democratically elected government. So we set out the parameters and parties were formed, and we organized an election, and election took place, and President Obasanjo eventually emerged as the president-elect, and he was sworn in.
Former head of state Chief Olusegun Obasanjo of the People's Democratic Party (PDP) won the 1999 presidential election and served for 2 terms. President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua won the 2007 general election. He, however, died in 2010. Vice President Goodluck Jonathan served out his term and was given the mandate to lead by Nigerian voters in the 2011 elections.
December, when I became a deputy governor, of course, you know what happened in Alamis, Bayelsa State then. At the time, my boss then, later Alamisia, was arrested in the UK. Ordinarily, it would have made me to act. But people spoke with him, so he couldn't make me the deputy governor to act. And the state was like floating without a very, say, formal acting governor. So it is the State House of Assembly that passed a resolution that I should act. So, yes, I did not meet them. They felt that, look, the state must go forward, irrespective of what was happening with our principal. It passed a House of Assembly resolution. Then I became an acting governor. Before he was later impeached, of course, I became a substantive governor. And similar thing happened when I was the vice president. When my late boss, Yar'Adua, was sick. And there was no communication with the National Assembly for me to act. And of course, you remember the popular doctrine of necessity, which I did not initiate. So when I looked at these 3 things, it makes me believe that governance or leadership is about the people. It's not about an individual.
In 2015, the All Progressives Congress, a product of a merger of the Action Congress of Nigeria (ACN), Congress for Progressive Change (CPC), the All Nigeria People's Party (ANPP), and a faction of the All Progressives Grand Alliance (APGA), defeated the PDP to usher in a new order at the center. The patriotic concession by President Jonathan and his call to congratulate APC's Muhammadu Buhari remains one of the great acts of statesmanship in the Fourth Republic.
Your Excellency. Hello, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, how are you? I'm all right, Your Excellency. Congratulations. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
I was going to lose the election was not an issue to me because it's a decision I took far back in 2007 when I became a vice president. And I remember I mentioned to my friend who became my principal secretary when I became president, that, look, I don't like this. If I don't know whether one day by divine providence I'll become a president, I didn't know I was going to be. One thing I must do is to sanitize the electoral process, so that if a Nigerian president wins the election, people will not begin to doubt whether that election was properly conducted or not. The elections must be free and fair. And that is why when I became the president, the first thing I do was to do a little reforms in INEC and appointed somebody. People will say, why do you even appoint somebody you don't know? I said, look, we must conduct elections that people in the world will accept it. And when I won that 2011 election, world leaders were struggling to call me on phone to congratulate me. But when we won the election in 2007, people refused to congratulate us. It was very, very embarrassing. So when 2015 came up, I knew things were not done. There are some lapses from the INEC. So there were issues. It's difficult to conduct election, there will be no issues. But even at that, I asked myself, will I create a scenario where it will lead to the death of so many Nigerians? And I remember in my campaign, I said that my ambitions is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. And I kept to that. I meant it. So it was easy for me when I look at the scenario to take that decision, because the country was tense. I was the president, so I had the security reports. The country was tense.
In the ensuing years of the APC administration at the center, the need to revisit and correct past errors echoed, and so efforts were made to exorcise the ghost of June 12, 1993.
Our decision to recognize and honor June 12 and its actors is in the national interest. It is aimed at settling national healing process and the reconciliation of the 25-year festering wound caused by the annulment of the June 12 elections.
In an effort to get more inclusion and the buying of a younger generation, the Not Too Young Tehran Bill got the backing of the lawmakers and the executive. Conversely, the women folk have not been so lucky, as the efforts to get legislative backing for a greater purchase for women in the nation's political landscape fell flat in the National Assembly.
Being a woman in politics in Nigeria is like pulling teeth, as the British will say. But over the years, and particularly under the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, we have made some strides. Luckily, we have a First Lady who is passionate about issues regarding women. But it's not just women. We have a lot of men who are in support of women being in the forefront of politics. Talking about being in the forefront of politics, we are not talking about taking over completely. We are talking about working side by side with our men, as equal partners in the development of our nation.
So we need to be proactive. We need to get up. We need to act.
The 2023 general election is the latest installment in the Nigerian political history. It was keenly contested in more ways than one.
We will continue to work with the state to eliminate violence, crimes, and inhumanity to man.
At times, it looked like the umpire struggled to make itself heard over the loud voices of contestation.
Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected.
A political train has reached its stop in the subway, while a new one is taking off. New leadership, alliances, handshakes, and challenges have bordered. But the nation continues its journey with hope in the driver's seat.
We must all join hands to work hard so that we build a country for our grandchildren. See, we plan for ourselves in this country. We plan for ourselves. Oh, remove subsidy, oh, don't remove subsidy, because I'm thinking about, oh, if I'm going to buy petrol in the evening, how much will I pay for the liter and things like that. Both those of us in the government and those of us who are business or private people, everybody plan for himself. They don't plan for our grandchildren. And until we start planning for our grandchildren, we can never change. Forget about ourselves. Plan for the children.
We are maturing. I wouldn't say we are matured. We are maturing because we are learning, and we are learning fast. When we introduced our return to civil rule, we talked about learning process, what it is to educate the people who are going to come up to be the leaders, to educate the politicians, to educate virtually everybody, those who want to come in, either as legislatures or members of the executive and so on. And we are on the right track, and I hope we will continue to follow the correct track.
For the love of country and to make it, and for the responsibility that Nigeria has to most of the black people anywhere in the world, And with Nigeria had that possibility, if they can really even look at things in the overall, good and interest of the, of the people.